Okay, so to the whiteboard, hot tips for your access request to the NDIS. Number 1, be clear and factual. I think we've covered that a lot. This is definitely number 1. Number 2, so the NDIS will want to see some sort of functional capacity assessment. This is in addition to the access request form. You may be familiar with some of them already. So it could be the HUDAS, it could be the life skills profile, it could be a sensory profile through an OT. There are quite a few. So the tip is the NDIA, actually tells you which assessment to use and which practitioner is preferable for them. I would definitely follow that advice. So if you type into Google, types of disability evidence NDIS, you should be taken to an NDIS website page where it lists lots of types of disability. You just need to go on and select your diagnosis. Isn't that amazing? So, for example, if the diagnosis is intellectual disability, you just go on, click that, and then there's a drop down and it gives you usually it's their top 3 preferred practitioners. So for example, occupational therapist or GP is often one. It gives you 3 choices and then it gives you 2 or 3 choices for which assessment they would like. And that's because they've matched which type of assessment is best for which type of disability. It's not the same every time. Definitely go and check. So, types of disability evidence. Okay. So you essentially will have at a minimum the access request form plus a functional capacity assessment. Now, as I mentioned, you can add other evidence. What I will say, other evidence should not be older than 12 months. So less than 12 months. It doesn't help. I'll put reports. It doesn't help to have a report from 3 years ago, even if your condition is now stable. So if you are applying in 2021, this is October, don't submit anything unless it's from October 2020. All right, so less than 12 months. The other thing is important, it's for psychosocial entry. This is a very slightly different process. You still need access request form, you still need functional capacity assessment, and you can check the preferred ones. However, you need an additional form. This is the evidence of, that's a P, of psychosocial disability. Okay, evidence of psychosocial disability form. This is quite a long form. You may think, oh, if I'm filling this in, why do I still need to do the access request form? You do, so definitely just do it. But mainly the reason you do is because this form goes way more into the nitty-gritty of psychosocial disabilities, and it's things like hospital admissions. That's particularly relevant if you have an episodic condition. Having a condition that ebbs and flows, which is episodic, doesn't mean you cannot get NDIS funding, but this form makes it much more clear whether you meet the threshold for access. So hospital admissions, there's a big thing about which treatments you've tried and what year you started. There is also a shortened sort of assessment, like capacity assessment in there as well. So you must fill that out if you're applying with a psychosocial disability. It could be complex PTSD, it could be major depression, it could be major anxiety disorder. All those things would require this form. So what I have seen is people who think it helps to write every single diagnosis, including sort of comorbid symptoms and things that are caused by the first diagnosis and all of that. So there's a page where it says that you have to list your diagnosis, and there's like a primary diagnosis and then other diagnoses. Please, and I have seen this so much, and I know that I understand you think this would help. I really get it, because you think there's so many issues and they all make each other worse. So I totally get that, but please resist the urge to put more than clear, separate diagnoses. So if anything is sort of its own diagnosis but caused by a different diagnosis, do not list that. It is so confusing for an assessor to be reading like 5, 6, I've seen 7 diagnoses on a page before. And the problem is, if you do that, then you have to then prove that you have aggressively tried treatment for every single one, because the assessor often, I mean, even myself, I've read these and I've gone, it's really hard to figure out whether the permanent bit applies to everything. Does the functional impact, in the 6 domains, if we fixed one of the 7 diagnoses, would that mean the overall impact is then not substantial? So you're pretty much setting yourself up for quite an uphill battle with your own evidence if you're listing so many different ones. And I'm not saying don't list secondary diagnoses. It's about making really clear that they're distinct, and that individually each one is permanent, and that individually they have, or even combined, they can have that substantial impact, but you have to then make it clear that none of them could be treated to the point where the impact's not there. Only list distinct diagnoses. That is a very common thing. Total confusion from this thing. And I do understand, but I'm just here to give you advice. So look, I think that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one more, which is actually just relevant to early childhood. Early childhood. So you are considered part of the early childhood approach if your child is, you're not, your child is, you might be childish, but anyway, look, your child is considered early childhood approach if they are under 7 years old. And that essentially means that, for example, they could have a developmental delay, which is not otherwise tied to a specific diagnosis. Good. All right. Thanks for joining me today. It's Emilie, NDSP Plan Managers, and this was your section on access. So I will leave it there. Thank you.